People might get removed. Okay, that was not you guys. Thanks for joining us today. Obviously, wish we could have been in person, but fortunately, we have the technology to be able to do this together still, right?
Yeah.
So welcome. How are things on your end, guys? How you coping the last little while?
Yeah, it's been all right. Hasn't been great for our business, but it also hasn't crippled us or anything. It's been a lot of the deals we're working on kind of slowed down, got delayed a bit, and some customers went on pause. Some customers churned. You know what I mean? Especially the customers that rely heavily on in-store sales. But I'd say overall, it's business as usual, more or less.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
And maybe just to give everyone kind of a little bit of background. So I guess I've known you guys for what, 3 years now, 4 years, something like that. We first met at Invest Ottawa. You guys were in the accelerator at the time?
Yep.
Yeah. So, okay. So Noibu, how long have you guys been in business now?
Since 2017, March 2017, so a little over 3 years.
3 years, nice.
Yeah.
And maybe just to give everyone a little bit of background, maybe each of you kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of maybe a little bit about your education and how you guys kind of got into business together originally.
Sure. Kailin, I'll let you take this one.
All right, cool. So Rob and I have been friends since we're pretty much kids. We went to the same high school, then went to university together. Rob studied accounting. I studied finance, University of Ottawa. We were always kind of scheming different businesses we wanted to try and build. In university, we launched like a children's cybersecurity app when we were in, I think, second year university. But it struggled to kind of gain traction. We learned a lot from it. Didn't really go anywhere. After we graduated, we went and worked for banks for about a year and a half. Realized that it wasn't our calling, and we decided to essentially leave and start a company in March of 2017. In there somewhere as well, Rob and I started doing kind of some investing together, real estate, stuff like that. Learned a lot of kind of valuable business lessons through that. Just kind of, I think, our first real business that had like income, expenses, liabilities, and like all that stuff probably came from the properties that we bought together. Dealing with like crises from like leaky roofs to like mold and like random stuff that you can never imagine, like people clogging like sinks and stuff. So it's just like all these things that you never think of. So like that really gave us a lot of good business lessons. We learned how to like read people. Like you'd have that tenant that is like, oh, I just need my one break, and the next they're not paying the rent. So it's like you're learning all these like lessons that I feel like are valuable in business. And that kind of carried us into starting Noibu. We originally started Noibu as we wanted to do something in the real estate space, didn't really know what we wanted to do. We're both non-technical founders. So we didn't have like any engineering on the team. So we kind of played around in the real estate market, which brought us somehow to retail, and our first real kind of, our first real product, which a lot of people will remember us for, is kind of our 3D stores, our virtual shopping experiences, which essentially was taking a brick and mortar store and digitalizing it and making it shoppable. We're able to get some clients from that. We got some MRR. We actually raised some investment money, and then kind of quickly realized that the sales cycles were too long, the unit economics sucked, and it was just not a good business. It wasn't like a need to have. It was a very much of a nice to have. And I'll pass it on to Rob to maybe talk through our pivot and to kind of where we are now. But essentially, about a year and a half into the company, actually 2 years into the company. Yeah, we were flat on our face starting back on day one. We had no idea. We had just raised investment money. So we had to tell the investors that basically, hey, look, the thing that was so great 2 or 3 months ago, we now have new information that is leading us to believe that it's probably not the best use of our time. So maybe let Rob talk through the next portion of that transition.
Yeah, so basically that brought us to March 2019, so a little over a year now. And basically we made the decision to do a hard pivot. Basically what happened was we had a contract with Roots that was supposed to go through, And then they canceled it, and they basically said we had to do some budget cuts, and you guys didn't meet the threshold. And essentially reread that as your product is not essential. It's a nice to have. It's a vitamin, not a painkiller. And we made the difficult decision to say, okay, we got a bit of cash in the bank. We want to build a great company, but this is not going to be the product that gets us there. So we knew that we had some expertise in e-commerce specifically. So what we did was we began doing extensive customer discovery on our existing clientele and a little bit of our immediate sales pipeline. And we basically wanted to put ourselves in the shoe of an e-commerce director or VP e-commerce type person and really understand like what motivates them, like what are their top challenges. And basically, without even a product idea in mind, we knew that we wanted to build software in e-commerce, but we didn't know what product that would be. So basically, we did a series of interviews, and it led us to a pretty big pain point, which was e-commerce errors. So for example, anything on the front end that's breaking. So for example, JavaScript, that might cause your checkout to break. So you paid like, I don't know, like let's say $50 to get this user on your site. They have like $500 in their basket, and then a JavaScript error happens and they lose the entire transaction. So we got that feedback a little bit from our existing customers, and we decided to validate that idea. And basically we determined that that would be a good software to build, some sort of e-commerce monitoring and detection product. And we ended up basically asking two of our interviewees, like, okay, would you pay us like $20 a month, like right now, for us to just start manually doing this? And basically we got a quick yes for both of them. We proved out the concept. We basically were able to detect errors, provide value, provide lift on their site. And then from there, we essentially built out a software. And Kailin didn't mention, but 1 year into the old product, we were able to recruit a technical co-founder. So we were three at the time of starting this new adventure. And then a couple months into this new idea, we actually had our first angel investor join us full time. And he's also a technical founder as well. He's quite seasoned, so that helped us a lot on the software development side. So basically, we validated the idea, did a hard pivot, made a really tough decision that we wanted to build a company, but that product wasn't sustainable. And now we've been, April was a bit slow, but before that, we were growing like 100% month over month. We have about 35 customers around the world, from France, UK, Mexico, the States, and these are pretty big retail brands like Jack and Jones, Avon, the largest mattress company in the UK, the largest lamp company in Germany, Bath Depot. We had Linen Chest. A lot of cool brands, and they're paying us a good amount of money to basically come in, deploy our software, and detect any anomalies that are happening so that they can increase their sales. And essentially, the flow works where they deploy the software, errors happen to users, we capture that information, and then essentially they put in a fix, and then they'll see on their Google Analytics that their conversion on like Mozilla Mobile increased because it's no longer having like this particular bug. So it's pretty valuable. And really the big learning there is if you want to do something, you really have to provide value, just like you guys are at SEO Plus. You have to provide business value, and our first product didn't really do that. And now we're in a position where we're able to do that. So it's been quite the journey, 3 years in a bit, but now we have a business and it's growing, and we have good prospects, and we're pretty happy with it.
Absolutely. That's a really cool story. I kind of want to take a step back, just kind of to the early days. I know, and the journey's been really cool. I mean, I've kind of witnessed a bit of it as, early. I remember even sitting in at a pitch competition at Invest Ottawa, when you're pitching your first product. So, and I always like the idea, but I think it's, I have a lot of respect that you guys kind of carried through, you acquire customers, you got investment, and even just making that difficult decision to pivot. I think is a challenging thing, right? Because especially some people get really attached to an idea, right? And sometimes they can go a little bit too far down that path, and sometimes it's too late at that time. So, huge kudos to you guys being able to identify, a need that you could apply your skills towards. So I think that's really cool. But just taking kind of a step back, the early days, so you mentioned you had done this app, before you even started Noibu, which, if I recall, you had some kind of neat success or traction. Like what was that app again, just to remind me?
Yeah, so it was a children's cybersecurity app. So it's called Watchful Eye. We're in university, and we had this idea that there was a growing, a generation gap between parents and children when it came to smartphones. So like what we were seeing is that like some of our younger siblings or friends that had younger siblings, we were seeing that there's a large gap. Like we didn't grow up with, like, I don't know, Rob and I, and Brock, I don't think you either, like we didn't grow up with iPhones. We grew up with no phones and then flip phones that like internet, you didn't even have Wi-Fi. Like that concept was very foreign. And I'm talking about when you're kind of like pre-16. So we realized that there's a lot of ways for children to get in trouble on smartphones. So we said, okay, well, as long as the parents are paying for it, they should have some sort of understanding of what the child's doing with it. So we essentially built an app where any photo, any video you take on the phone got automatically brought into a cloud where the parents could monitor that. They could see your geolocation. This is pre-Find My Friends and all those iPhone features. You could basically see at any point where your child was based on the location. You could set up geo fences so that if they left school early, or if they, I don't know, were at the park or left the park when they weren't supposed to leave the park, it would send you push notifications. So it was a way of like protecting the child and kind of understanding that, hey, look, there's dangers to the smartphone. It evolved quicker than the parents did to it. We basically had built that up, and we always struggled with development. Like I mentioned, we weren't developers. So we had kind of a third person that we were paying to do it. And we're always kind of going into challenges, like the app's not working properly, or it's bugging, it's crashing. There's this, there's that. There's always kind of those challenges of outsourcing technology that we learned pretty early on. So when it came back to Noibu, we knew right away, hey, we can't outsource this. We have to either hire or find a partner that could join us on it.
Absolutely. And so to this day, now fortunately you have that technical co-founder, so he can help you with you guys have like a Shopify app itself, like that they install and that kind of stuff, or how does that work? You guys are offsite, like how?
Yeah, so we integrate through Google Tag Manager. We stayed off the marketplaces, like the Shopify, the BigCommerce marketplaces, for a couple of different reasons. So yeah, that's probably one of the bigger ones, but also like there's like a lot of things around that. It just becomes kind of bureaucratic. So our integration takes less than 5 minutes. It's just a piece of JavaScript in Google Tag Manager. So integration hasn't really been a barrier.
Oh, that's beautiful. Very simple.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, something you guys I've noticed along the year, you've done a lot of kind of pitch competitions, right? And you've actually been quite successful from what I've seen. So what's typically your approach with that? Are you guys still doing that? Or,
Yeah, good question. We were doing that a lot early on. It was a good source of cash, but we were doing it more so on the old product because it wasn't really getting traction. But when you're getting traction, your time is worth more doubling down on the product and acquiring customers. Because we can sign a customer paid up front for the year and get more money than any pitch comp right now. So that's kind of what we're focused on. But a lot of those pitch comps helped us with kind of bridging to finding early stages of product market fit, and we're still searching for that. But the pitch comps help kind of in those early stages of just funding the idea, you know what I mean? But in a sense, it's distracting, and it kind of is like a drug.
You got to keep going.
You extend your runway, and it's good to actually get a little bit of fire under you, because diamonds are really made under pressure, and that's what we found.
I love that. So, being an entrepreneur is a challenging journey, I would say, and has its pros and cons for sure. How do you balance your work-life balance as an entrepreneur?
Kailin, you want to start, and then I'll jump in there.
Sure. So we've been at this for about 3 years and a bit now. And when we first started, we thought that it was just you wake up as early as you can and you work as late as you can every day and drink like 7 cups of coffee in the interim.
And monsters.
And monsters, exactly. And then like we kind of realized that at one stage we were working but accomplishing little. basically getting next to nothing done, but we were working like crazy. So we kind of understood that it was like, okay, well, that doesn't really make sense. We're like putting in a lot of hours, but being not very productive with our hours. Now, I don't regret going through that because I think that everyone goes through that at one point in their career, whether they start a company or not. And I think that we now have kind of matured a lot in the sense where it's like, okay, let's close Slack, let's close our email, and let's focus on one task at a time. Let's go deep into work, get more done, and just like the goal is to get as much work done as possible, as much tangible work that moves the dial, and just like not focus on things that don't move the dial. So a great thing that I think we practice is at least once a week, we'll take a full day off for the most part. Maybe we'll like on Saturday or Sunday, we'll check our email like once. I try and take kind of Saturday off for the most part, and then get back to it. So I think taking off a full day, one thing that we incorporated into the company, which was pretty cool, was when we were all together, we would take a break at the same time during the day and go read together for 15 minutes. So we'd stop between like 12 and 12:15. Everyone would pick up a book and they would go read. We'd sit outside. That was a good way of disconnecting. And then I just think at the end of the day, it's really hard, and being at home has actually made that harder because I think we're working more now than we were before. But I think just eating properly, we cut out coffee. I cut out coffee because I found it to actually distract me more than anything else. Not to say that has the same reaction on everyone. Eating properly, exercising, and just like reading and taking some time for yourself is probably like my view on it. But yeah, I'll pass it on to Rob to tie that up.
Yeah, Kailin touched a lot about it. Recently, it's a bit more hard because you wake up and you're kind of at your office because you're at home. So I find myself just kind of in my chair all day. I get up, try to do a little bit of exercise, go for a walk. But I actually find myself working more now than I was when we had an office. But what you learn as an entrepreneur, whether you like it or not, especially at the early stages, like your life all becomes one. Like I will have sometimes something to do at like 2 p.m. So I'll go do it for an hour, but then I'm back and kind of going at my day-to-day tasks. Now I will say like a couple evenings during the week, I'll take them off and like go out with a friend or with the family, and you're allowed to do that. But especially at the early stages when you're starting to get traction, there's a lot of work that goes into it, but you have to make the time. It's easy to kind of get sucked into those like quadrant one activities where it's go, go, go. You're getting an email. You have to respond to it right away. You have to carve out the time for things like gym, going on walks, like spending time with family, spending time with friends. And it's become a lot easier to do that. Well, pre-COVID, a little bit more difficult now, but earlier on, we weren't doing a really good job of that, and we found ourselves just kind of working all of the time. But we've learned that this is a marathon, not a sprint, and you have to take some time to yourself, because sometimes, and I know I think, Brock, one of your questions is like creativity. You can't be creative if you're just always on and just doing like these quick tasks, Slack message, email, this, that. You have to be able to like go on a walk, take some time, spend some time with some family, and then that's when a lot of the good ideas are actually sparked. So I describe it the best. It's like it's become one world, but I'm really happy. Like when I'm at work, I actually like what I'm doing. So I don't see it as kind of work-life balance, more so like integration. But that's not to say that it's going to work with everyone. It's just what works for me.
Yeah, I really like that. It kind of goes back to, I mean, if you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work. I mean, maybe sometimes, but it depends on what's going on.
Well, Brock, just like a good point. I was listening to a podcast, and everyone praises athletes. Like LeBron James is a workaholic. He shoots hoops all day, and he just loves playing basketball. Like I feel the same with my job, and I don't know. It's just that's what I like to do. But I do encourage, like, you have to make some time outside of work, because if it becomes all consuming, it's a bit much. Like that healthy balance in that sense, you still need to make it. Just kind of separating from the company.
Absolutely, and it's challenging right now with everything that's going on. Like, I know myself, like I personally struggle with balance because I'm all day every day. And my last vacation was last June, you know? And I was like, I worked through, you know, Christmas, and I was going to take one, honestly, in like March or April. And then this happened. I was like, well, fuck. Not going to have that balance for a while.
For sure. And just for anyone on the call that's like considering entrepreneurship or you know, anything of the sorts, like I haven't taken a vacation in 2.5 years. I've worked 2.5 years straight, and that's by choice. And that's because like I want this more than anything. But that's not necessarily what everyone wants. But if you want to get something started, especially at the early stages, like 9 out of 10 businesses fail. So you have to work really, really hard. And then hopefully once you get your feet under the ground, like now we're starting to get some traction. We have revenue. Things are a bit more stable. You can actually take some time. Like Kailin talks about taking a day off a week. You know, we're able to afford that, but early on, it's really tough.
Absolutely. So yeah, we talked about that. So you mentioned books. Like, what are you guys reading right now? Is it fiction, nonfiction?
Yeah, so I haven't read a fiction book since high school. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I actually think being creative is really important. That's just for me. I always look at business books. So I'd say probably the top book that's changed my life. That's not even a business book. It's a book called The Power of Habit. I don't know if everyone's heard of that one before, but it really it teaches you a lot about yourself. And you're kind of like, oh, I didn't know that's why I did that. Like, for example, if you're trying to stop having coffee in the morning, you could replace it with a warm glass of water. Well, why do you do that? Because your brain actually is not craving coffee as much as you think it is. It's actually craving a warm beverage, right? So that's why you see if people are trying to quit smoking, they'll have a lot of lollipops or stuff like that, like something like in their lips, kind of giving them the same sensation. So it talks a lot about that stuff. So that's probably like the top of my list. And then if you're in sales, I would say the two books that are a must read is from the first one is Predictable Revenue. And then the second one's From Impossible to Inevitable. So it talks about building an outbound sales process. I think that one's super, super clutch for reading. One that I'm reading right now that I really like is it's called Deep Work. And it talks about how everyone is very distracted. So for example, I still use Slack, but like instead of having everything always open, I have everything always closed, and I complete a task. And then I say, okay, I have 5 minutes or 10 minutes for my next call. I updated the CRM. I can go check Slack. I go check Slack, put out whatever like small fire you have to put out. Another one that actually Rob did that inspired me to do the same thing was deleting my email off my phone. So deleting my email off my phone, I actually found myself, because we do a lot of European business, that you wake up at 5 a.m. and you have like 10 emails and you're just like automatically kind of panicking. And you go into this like hyper stress mode. So yeah, I mean, that's, I know that was a lot, but that's kind of some books I'm reading. I know Rob's reading some really interesting books as well. I'll pass it on to him.
Yeah, for sure. Those are a lot of good ones. Just off the top of my head, my favorite one that I recently finished is Good to Great. It talks about how some of the great companies were created and what makes them stand apart from the good companies that are still pretty solid, but they're not outliers. And a book I'm reading right now, a couple books actually. One is called The Messy Middle, and it talks about whether it's a startup or a personal project or a career endeavor. It talks about like the middle stages of that particular endeavor. A lot of people see either the beginning, which is always glorified, of like, oh, I'm starting this new idea or this new side project. And then people see the end, for example, like Shopify. Like, wow, Shopify is a great company, but no one saw that Shopify was nothing for like 5 to 10 years. And it talks about that middle stage. And I find that's a pretty awesome book to get the knowledge of what it takes to go from like that initial idea to something else. And whether it's your career or a startup or a side project, it's really useful. But it's called Messy Middle, and it's by Scott Belsky. He's the Chief Product Officer of Adobe. And the second book I'm reading is called Super Thinking, and it's this concept of mental models. And this book is just a conglomerate of a lot of different mental models. And what mental models are just ways of thinking, and they help you make decisions. They basically hardwire these ideas in your head, and when you're evaluating different things, you're able to make decisions quicker if you can just reference these mental models. So that book's called Super Thinking. So yeah, those are pretty good books. Recently, I went from like reading one book in a row from cover to cover to dabbling and reading like multiple books at the same time, because I found myself, I was like forcing myself to read books that I didn't really like. And recently, if I start a book and I'm halfway through and I don't like it, I just toss it. And that's okay. Like I find myself reading more now that it's more enjoyable to me. And then I also I find finding good blogs. There's a lot of good resources online are awesome, and it's easy to like whip open your phone and just read while you're eating or something.
Yeah, for sure. I'm a blog reader more than anything. I mean, I got books, but honestly, they sit on my nightstand for forever. I got the Ideal Team Player sitting there, and I haven't even opened it up. I'm bad. I really like that. I think there's a lot of really cool ones there, and some of the ones you mentioned, Kailin, I know read before. So, and even kind of your direction where you're talking about with, you know, the multitasking thing and distractions, and I think we struggle with that, especially like as an agency, right? When you got 30 clients you're working on things for, and you know, emails and Slack and everything else that's going on, right? It can be really challenging. So I really like that method of kind of just like closing everything off, focusing on what you're doing, and then, you know, moving on to the next thing, right? Because multitasking is a killer.
Yeah, the book scared me nicely.
Well, like, even now I catch myself like Slack, email, back to Slack, and I try my best not to do that, because you feel like you're busy and you feel like you're accomplishing things, and then you get home and you're like, what did I really do today that was meaningful?
Yeah. How do you right now, in terms of like, who are you guys both doing sales right now? Is one of you doing more operations, or how's that going? Like, are you outsourcing the sales? What are you doing?
Yeah, so for sales specifically, so I'm on the sales team. I'm closing a lot of the deals. We have two other team members that are booking the leads. So they book the leads. I then try and close the deals. The deals that we do close, Rob and I then partner on them to make sure that they have a really good onboarding process. And then they're transferred over to Rob, who will make sure that they're happy, but will also set the product vision to make sure that what we're building is what our customers are missing, essentially, from the experience today.
So Rob, you would typically take the client once they've been kind of sold on, you would onboard them and then kind of guide them through the process type of thing?
Yeah, basically in charge of quote unquote customer success, and then also taking their feedback and building out our roadmap of how we can solve their problems with our software, essentially. So kind of like a mixed role of customer success and product.
And how do you guys approach the onboarding? Like, what do you have any tips there?
Yeah, for sure. So we have an awesome process that we recently created. Basically, how our sales works from sales to onboarding is essentially we have the BDRs or the SDRs book the meeting. Kailin walks them through the initial call. He is able to kind of go through the demo process, and we actually insert our line of JavaScript before we close the deal. And then we meet about 7 days later, and we present them a business case of 3 revenue impacting issues. And essentially, we're able to show like a 3 to 10 times ROI just by solving those 3 issues. And that makes a really smooth transition to onboarding, because those same errors that we sold them on are then transferred to onboarding, and then onboarding sets expectations. They're like, what is the year going to look like? What does success look like? And then like, let's get off to a good start. Like if the goal is 10x ROI for the project, then like, let's get 3x right off the bat and track that throughout the year. So the initial like 30 to 60 day experience is really focusing on solving those first 3 issues that Kailin and his team were able to identify. And then from there, continue working with the customer to make sure that they're hitting their ROI target. But it's really crucial that at the beginning stages, like there's alignment. They know what they're doing. earlier on, we were kind of just throwing them in the dashboard, and we're like, go find errors, go fix them, and there wasn't a good way to like, close the value loop.
Yeah, I really like that. So early on, getting that data, getting that analytics, setting that goal, communicating it, and working towards like on a roadmap, I guess, towards success. Right?
Exactly.
I really like that.
Exactly. And then we try to do monthly touch-ins with each customer, and then we've actually switched from monthly contracts to annuals. So now we have to like work on that renewal process, which we're working at right now, which we haven't gone through on a full cycle yet.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest changes we made, which helped us out the most, was we aligned BDR to sales to success. We like made it all one process. So for example, all the accounts, exactly, including the product. So all the accounts that the BDR team is chasing are accounts that we know have a high probability of having a checkout error based on the platform and the volume. So we've narrowed that down. So then when we get them on a call, we know right off the bat that they're a good fit. So once we have them on a call, to really further qualify them, we do a proof of concept where we deploy our script for free. And then Rob and I will go through the dashboard a week after. So when we have enough data in the dashboard, we'll agree on errors, because not all errors are created equally. Like some errors are much harder to solve than others. And some errors are kind of like a rabbit hole. Some just like happen and you don't know why and you don't know how to fix it. So we agree on errors that we know historically have been solvable, and we agree on an ROI on that. And then we present that to the business, to the end user, so that they agree to sign on, understanding that if they get these 3 issues solved, that will be successful. And then when we onboard them, there's no surprises. That's the same 3 errors that Rob's going to help them fix. Not necessarily help them fix, but just be there if they have any questions, like, oh, what do I do? I'll send this to your dev shop, or send this to Shopify, or send this to BigCommerce. And then at that point, we've actually identified that our aha moment is if a customer solves a revenue impacting issue that's at least 3 times the cost in the first 60 days. Out of our customers that have done that, they all love us, and they're over the moon. They're super happy. Like that's their aha moment. That's their moment of success where they tell their friends. So
how long does that last? How long does that buy you?
That's one of the.
It's funny you say that. So, for example, we have customers almost going on a year now that are on monthly contracts. And they got a lot of that value up front, but we've also been able to show them subsequent value. So for example, there's a customer yesterday, it's actually Jack and Jones. They have a new issue with their Shopify template, and I was able to send them an email and say, hey, have you guys seen this in the dashboard? So a lot of value up front, but then they do redesigns, they do changes throughout the year, browser updates, and stuff breaks throughout the year.
Yeah. So it's basically building that trust initially, and you'll have a lot more.
That's the biggest thing. So like if we're able to prove to them we can actually detect an error that they can resolve and drive value, the trust is there for the future. But if we can't do that early on, they're like, oh, like this is pretty expensive. Like, am I really going to continue paying this? I haven't even been able to solve one error.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because for us, it's similar in a lot of ways, right? Whether it's advertising, it's like, okay, I'm throwing all this money, I got to get my customer acquisition cost to X, right? You have to hit that target. Or, I'm thinking of a client, a couple of years ago, they did motion RC airplanes out of the States. Basically, the largest RC airplanes e-commerce store in the States came to us. They basically said, we are the biggest. We sell 10 million US annually, and how are we not on the first page of Google, right, for these terms? So we brought them in, we went through our process, we did the audit, we did the keyword research, we targeted basically their category pages for some of these very competitive terms. Each term had like 30,000 monthly searches in the States. And we knew if we got them there, they would crush it, right? We got them there, and I think it was like 2 or 3 months. We got them in number 2 position on the first page, right, for multiple of these terms. So generating tens of thousands of visits, additional visits a month. And 1 month later, he says, okay, what are you going to do for me now? Right? And we're like,
oh my God.
Damn, we should have taken our time with that then maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It all depends on the client.
For sure.
You guys have they're going to change their sites, and they're going to keep doing stuff. So you'll always have more opportunity, right?
Yep.
I like that. Are most of the errors you're seeing like JavaScript primarily? Would it be?
So seeing a lot of JavaScript errors and a lot of server side errors. So for example, like issues with hosting. They get a spike in traffic and their checkout goes down, so they need to adjust how much server space they have, stuff like that. Okay. Server side and JavaScript. The ones that are most solvable are the JavaScript ones, because we give like a stack. We're like, JavaScript is broken here, go look for it.
Yeah. Is there any interest down the road of bringing in a tech team so you can solve them yourselves and build them additional, or are you still just kind of pass it off?
I think the long-term play there would be to have a partner network of development shops, and we just reference and take a spread or a commission or something on the sale, or maybe just a flat fee. I don't think we would ever want to solve issues in-house. We want to really be a product focused company, and to do that, we want to invest everything into that product, and then let the professionals deal with that. We think our wheelhouse is just in detection and kind of prioritizing.
I love that. Otherwise, it gets really messy.
For sure.
All right. So usually at this point, what I'd like to do is kind of open it up for questions. So I know we actually did we had a training on Tuesday with Kyle Turk. I don't know if you guys know him. Kind of an Ottawa-based marketer.
Yeah, marketing. Yeah.
Great guy. He was actually we were talking about books. You mentioned kind of the nonfiction stuff. So his was, he loves autobiographies of gangster rappers. He's like,
that's so random.
Yeah, he's like, they're the best marketers. Like, it was pretty.
That's the point.
Yeah, a lot of people were commenting in the text chat. So I'll open up the floor, see if anyone has any questions. I know Amanda and Derek are usually pretty. Here we go. Yulia's got one. So Yulia's our web design team lead. From your experience, what makes a successful startup team?
That's a good question, Rob. You should hop on that
one. Okay. So, all right. So it depends what type of. I'll speak from experience. So Kailin and I were very adamant about building a product software company from day one. So that being said, let me just reread the question. So just from like a technical standpoint, if you want to build a product company, you need to have an in-house technical resource. Originally, we tried to hire a full-time developer. So we basically were Kailin, myself, the founders, and then we had a full-time software developer, and then we had I think a couple co-ops trying to build the virtual store. We quickly realized that we need like strategic technical expertise in-house, and essentially we went on a hunt for a technical co-founder that lasted a very long time, because we interviewed a lot of people. Either people don't have the same commitment, the same alignment, the same values, and it's very difficult to find. And Kailin and I didn't have an immediate like close friend that was a software developer. So we actually ended up going through the Startup Garage program at the University of Ottawa. And there was a student there that had a startup, and they ended up folding at the end of the cohort. And we got along really well, built a relationship over the summer, and he was probably one of the best developers in that cohort. And we were able to kind of find alignment there and find that. So getting a technical co-founder, someone who can do sales, someone who can do customer-facing stuff, and really less so on the skill side, people that are determined and are willing to commit to the next 10 years of their life on this particular endeavor. You can't have people that are, I'll give this a try for 6 months, and if it goes cool, then I'll stick around. And I would say that that's the #1 leading indicator of a successful startup team. Look at Kailin and I. We both have business degrees, and now we have a company that like takes in revenue on a software product. So we had the same alignment, we had the same commitment, and we made it happen, and we found other people like that. So that energy kind of rubs off. So I would say like that's the #1 factor. So going back to it, if I was like a single non-technical founder trying to do something, I would try to find someone similar with my same drive and then figure out everything after. So that's just from like the startup team dynamic. I don't know if Kailin wanted to add anything there.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think first thing is you have to have the same commitment levels. And another big thing that Rob and I learned is you have to drop the ego. If you have multiple people that want to be on the cover of Forbes, that always ends really badly. The best is you have no one who wants to be on the cover of Forbes. You want people that just want to build the organization. And if you can't really spend time with them as a friend, you're probably not going to get along with them, because you're going to end up spending more time, like you're probably going to spend more time with them than your husband or wife for the most part, to be completely honest with you. So that I think Rob hit most of the things I want to touch on. I think finding people that like-minded, always working on solutions, dropping egos, and just finding people with the same level of commitment. As soon as you start to feel like someone's working harder than the other, there starts to be tension. And most startups die from suicide and not from murder. So,
yeah, I completely agree with all your points too. Like, I know for myself and Eddie as founders, we knew each other previously, so we had a good relationship. We had the same goal, and yeah, there was definitely, I don't think there was any egos, but everyone, we're working towards the same goal, and yeah, it doesn't feel like work at that point, right? So that's really interesting. Those things you said, it definitely resonates. We have a question from Sonia. How big is the team currently, and what are the roles like?
Yeah, so we're 9 people, and as it looks right now, we're 3 on the sales team. We have Rob, who's heading up product. We have someone on with Rob on customer success, and then we have 3 more people on actual engineering. Sorry, 4 people on engineering. Yeah, 4 people on engineering that are building products. Yeah.
Nice. And yeah.
That was it. I
think
that made 9.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's you guys are growing. That's how many have you added in the last 6 months? Like, have you added a few, like 2 or 3?
6 months. Yeah, 6 months ago, it was only
in the past 6 months.
Yeah, we're only at 4 6 months ago. Yeah,
because I think I saw you in December. Actually, you dropped off a nice gift basket or some cookies or something. I don't know. That's good. Amanda, the way you pivoted your entire business is very bold. Can you give strategies to pivot on a more micro level, i.e., pivoting if you're stuck on a task, stuck on a project, being open to starting over, not worrying about sunk costs, etc.?
That's a really valuable skill, especially whether you're individual contributor, manager, founder, whatever. It's super easy to kind of get emotionally attached to your work early on, and I find me and Kailin were doing a little bit of that with the virtual store. And you quickly realize that if you have some sort of like longer term goal, so like let's say you want to make a customer happy or close a deal, then you got to be forward looking. And if you have this like attitude of forward looking, you won't care what happened in the past. You just want to see the path forward. And if the work that you've done is a sunk cost, you won't look backwards. So there's been a lot of things, for example, like there's been a lot of product decisions that I've made, and then I've just been like, let's cut that. Like, let's cut that feature. We tried it. It didn't work. We need to focus kind of on the bigger grand vision of where the product needs to go. Or same thing with like customer processes. Letting go of like the decisions you made and the ego that you may have, which I had, Kailin had, we all have, and just moving forward has helped me personally. And I think that pivot kind of helped us do that on a grand scale and then translate it to like little day-to-day tasks as well. So just always do the right thing. And like, it doesn't matter what you did in the past, just like, what is the path forward, and look forward. And it's difficult. It's human nature to kind of like look at it as a whole in the past and in the future, but just look forward and what's the progression there.
I like that. Amanda, so one of the mindsets we've had lately is to love the process, love that full inbox, love that challenging project versus seeing them as obstacles to liking the job. What's the worst / most challenging part of being an entrepreneur that you've turned into something you love?
So, I mean, the whole process for me, like as of late, maybe I have recency bias, but I mean, I love every aspect of it. The only thing that sucks that I'm still getting better at getting used to is when you lose a customer, that still stings. But for the most part, like you build immunity. So if you lose a deal, like when we first started, we thought that like maybe equals yes. And now we know yes equals maybe. So like over time, you just get a lot more desensitized. And I think at the end of the day, you just need to like love what you're doing every day. Feel like you're working towards a goal that's like internal, and then just enjoy the people you're working with. I think that's the biggest thing. Like as soon as kind of that changes, I feel like you start to check out and things start to suck.
I think for me, it's disappointing customers or like not meeting expectations. And I really, like, still really bothers me, and I'm trying to like work through that. But recently I've been trying to kind of take it as a positive and been like, okay, this is an opportunity to make it right. And I find it's better to take action towards something. And like, for example, if I have like a bad customer call right away, I'll try to, for example, go in their dashboard and find an error and send them an email, and taking it less to heart. But as a founder, like I want to make these people happy. And like, that's why we're in the game of entrepreneurship. It's at the end of the day, it's about the customer. And but that's something that I'm personally still kind of working through right now. The disappointing customers or not meeting their expectations.
And I think that'll never end. I think it's every time you have to try to take something from it, right? Like every mistake, there's an opportunity to like hopefully not make that mistake again, or get better for next time. It just keeps going and keeps going, and that's how, you guys, once you're doing this for several years, someone else coming off the street, I mean, they're going to have a lot of, it's been challenging for them to catch up, right? Because they got to make those mistakes too, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Kara, not really a question, but more a comment. I noticed you work with Shopify, and I'm surprised they don't have a similar error detection feature in their services. Did you have a lot of work around patenting your idea? And would you ever consider being bought out by e-commerce platforms like Shopify?
Okay, so that's a good question. So the way Shopify works is their core platform is very solid, and they have amazing testing procedures and monitoring in place for their in-house technical team. So the core Shopify platform is extremely solid, but where it starts to get a little bit noisy is when you have third-party integrations, custom redesigns, and these are all things that are done on an individual customer basis. And therefore, it's not under Shopify's domain to continue monitoring that. Their job is to monitor the core platform. And as a result, they're not really interested in creating monitoring analytics software for e-commerce merchants. That's kind of a different product and not part of their great mission of like make e-commerce better. That would be more so like a monitoring tool. And that's why, so we've had conversations with, we were part of a University of Ottawa program. We got to meet the CTO of Shopify, and he had interesting perspectives on what we were doing. He was pretty happy with what we're doing, but it's not really aligning with their strategic objectives. We're not really looking to sell the company right now. We want to kind of build it for the next 7, 10 years, 15 years. And you can never say never. Like the way we approach that is like, if ever a situation comes up, you have to evaluate it as is, but we're not actively like looking to sell the company or build it to sell. We want to build it to be great. And I don't know if there's a second portion to that question.
Oh, that was it. There you go. Thanks for the explanation. Derek. So Derek's our sales team lead. What outbound prospecting tactic has been the most effective?
Yeah, so I think no one's going to get on a phone call with you unless you have something that they want. You need a hook. So just off the top of my head, I don't know if this even makes sense, but I would say, okay, our most successful customers are on the Shopify platform, and they have between 50 and 150K hits per month. So let me go buy a list of those customers, and let me do a bit of research, and let me Google them and see where they rank. Okay, they rank second and third page. Okay, so now I'm trying to understand that they're on whatever fourth page. Okay, now I'm trying to see, let me look back at a case study where a merchant that's on Shopify, similar wheelhouse, not necessarily selling the same products, increased their sales by 10% by going from page 4 to page 1. And then I would reach out to them and say, hey, look, I saw you ranked page 4 on Google. And I put your website through SEO Bandit or whatever that thing, SEO Rush. And here's some suggestions to get to page 1. We had a customer that did similar suggestions and they increased sales by 10%. Would love to hop on. Like I would approach it like that, where you're giving value up front. So I think blasting people saying we are ranked number 1 on Google ourselves and we can do the same for you, like I don't think that works, to be honest. I think you can do without spending too much time per lead. I think you can create a generic message by grouping people. So pulling a list, putting everyone who's on page 4 in the same list, and then saying, giving some kind of broad stroke tips, like, I don't know, meta tags or something. I know nothing about SEO, so I'm just using words. So right off the bat, that's what I would think would be valuable. A second. Oh, thanks, Mom. Thanks, Mom. Hey guys, Mom's lunch is coming in. Thanks, Mom.
Community service.
Yeah, exactly. So right off the bat, that's what I would.
Did you mention what we're doing?
Oh yeah, so we're identifying customers that have checkout errors, and then we're reaching out saying, we have a video of a checkout error. Do you want to have a conversation? It's put more elegantly than.
I love it. You guys were having good success with that last time we chatted, I believe.
Yeah. So that works really well, to be honest. But I was just trying to kind of approach it from how maybe you guys could look at it. But that's we create a hook that essentially it would be irresponsible to ignore.
Absolutely.
And there's like, just to tell you on that, there's a little bit of fear there. Like, how can you ignore an email that says like you have a checkout error? And people respond to it.
How are you getting through though? Is it email list? Are you doing LinkedIn, or what are you doing for outreach?
Yeah, so it's a combination. We use a platform called SalesLoft. It syncs into our CRM. And then essentially what we do is we created a cadence where day 1, you follow them on LinkedIn. So you don't add them on LinkedIn, you follow them so they take a look at your profile. Day 2, you send them an email in the morning, then you give them a call right after and you say, hey, look, I just sent you an email. You wait a couple days, a LinkedIn message goes out. You wait a couple days, you email a follow-up, give them a call. So it's a combination of all three. Most of the times, you hit people up on different platforms. Then at one point they'll start answering you, as long as you're not bombarding them. You have to be like respectful. So 2-3 touch points per week max.
Okay. I like that. Anton, how clear should your idea of a startup be in the early stages? What goals did you set for yourself?
I mean, so here's the thing, and I don't recommend doing this. In hindsight, what really helped me and Kailin is just that we had grit and we didn't want to quit. But that's not necessarily like the best tactical approach to take. We had like ideas of a company, and we had an initial idea that Kailin briefly mentioned when we first quit our jobs. And it was some sort of real estate idea, and it was very, very murky. We didn't validate it whatsoever. So I think, to answer your question, Anton, it's more so important to actually come up with an idea and then validate it before doing anything than the idea itself. So like, let's say that you come up with some idea, you think it's good, and you want to pursue it as like, let's say, a side project. What I'd recommend is then going to talk to 10 people in that industry, or 10 people if it's like a consumer idea, and validating that idea without ever mentioning the product. So that's very, very important. So like, let's say you have an idea and it's for restaurants, and you need to validate it with like restaurant owners. You can't go to the restaurant owner and be like, oh, I have this like widget that's going to increase your like restaurant bookings. Like, are you interested? And then they're going to be like, yes, I'm interested. And it's going to be like confirmation bias. You have to ask them about their process of like increasing restaurant bookings. And you have to understand, is that process broken, without ever mentioning your idea. You can never mention your idea in the early stages of discovery. And then at the very end, you have to ask them, how much would you be willing to pay like on a monthly basis for this widget? And if they're like, oh, $100, then be okay, like whip out your checkbook. I'm going to start doing this for you manually right now. And if they don't pay you, then you don't have a good idea. people were willing to pay us on our discovery calls for our idea.
I love that. That's cool. Great advice. Rinmai, how did you approach your first investor?
Kailin, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So our first investor technically was a pitch comp, but I mean, our first like angel investor came through. We were doing pitch comps, and then I mean, investment is bittersweet. I would actually I would advise against getting investment. Not that we regret it. It was something that's good. But I would actually advise against it. I think most people think that if you raise money, you then have a company. Raising money actually kind of sucks. It's better to focus on revenue and customers. And I think that you can do enough in the early stages through the process that Rob just mentioned, where you can make the choice. You'll have investors coming to you versus you going to investors. If you just focus on the fundamentals, which is, so making money is a proportion of value. When we changed our mindset from how much can we charge them to how much can we create value for them, we started making more money, because now we focus on creating value and then we take 10% of the value, right? So if we're able to increase our sales by $1 million, then it's a no-brainer to give us $100,000, right? Or to give us $10,000 based on 100K. So if you just focus on creating value, like money is just a proportion of value. You can never charge $1 million for something that drives 100K of value. So just focus on maximizing value, and then like the money will come. And I think if you do it that way, where it's like drive value first, you won't have to get investors unless you want to, right? Like, and that'll be an accelerant versus like a lifeline. But we had a lot of financial help from like IRAP and like government grants and stuff. So that probably like fed us for the first year and a half. But I mean, just flat out transparent. When you first start, like you're probably not going to take a salary for a year and a half. That's the kind of situation Rob and I were in. We were paying people and just not getting paid. I mean, so you have to kind of be realistic around that too. Like, you're not going to start a company and because it's you, someone's going to give you $250,000. You're going to go back on the same salary you left. Like, that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I think your advice of creating value and not chasing money, I think that can be applied in many areas, right? Even just career-wise, right? Not even if it's just business, right? As an employee, right? Don't chase the money. Look at how can you create value for the company, and the money will come because you've created that opportunity, right? So I really like that advice. All right, well, I think we're up on our time. So guys, I really want to thank you. This has been awesome having you here, and learned a lot from your experiences and stuff like that. And we're definitely gonna look forward to continue watching you do great things. It's been awesome.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks so much for having us. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Rob, and thanks everyone for listening.
No worries. If anyone has any questions, wants to get in touch, what's the best way? LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn.
Yep, it's probably the best.
All right, beauty. Well, thanks again, guys, and I'm sure we'll be chatting soon.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Take care.
See ya.
Yeah, bye.